They laughed, "She's too big to be a bride." But the rancher's daughter chose the Apache girl. She moved quietly through the wide fields, her boots pressing into the soft earth that still held the coolness of night. This land had shaped her since childhood. Every fence she fixed, every animal she guided, every long day under the open sky had made her strong. Her body grew tall and broad from work that never paused for weather or mood. To her, this strength felt normal. It was simply the result of living honestly. But to the people of the town, it became something to judge. She lived on the edge of a small rural community where everyone knew everyone else's business. From a young age, she noticed how eyes followed her when she walked into town. Some looked curious, some impressed, but many carried quiet laughter. At school, other girls whispered that she was too big, too rough, not soft enough. When dances were held, boys looked past her, choosing smaller girls with delicate hands and gentle voices. She learned early not to expect invitations. She learned to stand alone without showing how much it hurt. Her father, a hard-working rancher, loved her deeply but did not always know how to protect her from words. He was proud of her strength and trusted her with work usually given to grown men. Still, when neighbors came by, he heard their comments. "She works like a man," they said. "She's built like one too." Sometimes they laughed, thinking it harmless. Sometimes they shook their heads as if her future were already decided. Her father said nothing in response, but the silence often hurt as much as the words. As she grew older, talk of marriage became common in the town. Girls her age were being matched, engaged, and celebrated. Mothers whispered plans over tea and fathers discussed land and family names. When her name entered these talks, the tone changed. People smiled tightly or laughed openly. "Who would marry a girl like that?" someone once said. "She's too big to be a bride." The words spread fast, repeating themselves in different mouths, growing sharper each time. The rancher's daughter heard everything. Even when people thought she could not hear, the sound traveled. It followed her back to the ranch, into the barn, into her quiet nights. She never cried in front of anyone. Instead, she worked harder. She lifted heavier loads, stayed longer in the fields, and pushed her body until exhaustion made thoughts fade. Strength became her shield, but inside, the wounds remained. Despite the pain, she did not hate the town. She understood that people feared what did not fit their narrow ideas. They wanted brides to be small, gentle, and easy to control. She was none of those things. Still, on some nights, when the stars were bright and the land silent, she wondered what it would feel like to be chosen without judgment. Not far from the ranch lived an Apache girl, raised with traditions that taught her pride, patience, and respect for the earth. She moved through the world quietly but confidently, carrying herself with calm strength. Her life had not been easy either. She had learned early what it meant to be judged for where she came from and how she lived. People often misunderstood her culture, reducing it to shallow ideas or ignoring it completely. The Apache girl noticed the rancher's daughter long before they spoke. She saw her riding horses with steady control, fixing broken tools with focused care, and standing tall even when others laughed. There was something honest in the way she lived, something familiar. The Apache girl recognized that kind of strength because she carried it herself, though in a different form. They first crossed paths during a shared work project near the edge of town. A fence needed repairing, and help was called from nearby families. The rancher's daughter worked silently, focused on the task. When she looked up, she saw the Apache girl holding tools with practiced ease. Their eyes met briefly. No words were exchanged, but a quiet understanding passed between them. Over the next few days, they worked side by side. Conversation came slowly, built from small observations about the land and weather. Neither felt the need to explain themselves. They both knew what it meant to be seen but not understood. This shared experience formed a quiet bridge between them. The rancher's daughter noticed how the Apache girl listened more than she spoke. When she did speak, her words were thoughtful and steady. There was no laughter in her eyes, no judgment. For the first time in a long while, the rancher's daughter felt seen without being measured. Still, the weight of the town's voices did not disappear. One afternoon, while passing through the market, the rancher's daughter overheard laughter behind her. "Imagine her in a wedding dress," someone joked. "There's no dress big enough." The words struck hard. She kept walking, her face calm, but her chest felt tight. The Apache girl standing nearby heard it too. She saw the rancher's daughter's shoulders stiffen, though she did not turn around. In that moment, something inside the Apache girl shifted. She understood that silence could protect pain, but it could also deepen it. Later that day, she found the rancher's daughter alone near the fields. "You don't deserve that," she said simply. The rancher's daughter looked at her, surprised. No one had ever said those words out loud. She did not know how to respond, so she nodded and returned to her work. But the words stayed with her. They echoed louder than the laughter ever had. As days passed, their connection grew. They shared meals under open skies and rested after long hours of labor. The rancher's daughter found herself speaking more freely, talking about her love for the land and her frustration with the town's narrow views. The Apache girl listened without interruption, offering understanding rather than advice. The rancher's daughter began to realize that the problem was never her body or her strength. It was the limited vision of those who could not imagine a bride who did not fit their rules. This thought felt both freeing and frightening. Letting go of others' approval meant stepping into an unknown future. Part one of her story ends not with a decision, but with a shift. The laughter still existed. The judgment still followed her. But for the first time, she was not carrying it alone. A quiet bond had formed, one rooted in respect rather than expectation. And though neither woman spoke of what lay ahead, something new had begun, something strong enough to challenge the words that once cut so deeply. As the weeks passed, the connection between the rancher's daughter and the Apache girl grew quietly, like roots spreading beneath the soil. There was no sudden moment that changed everything. Instead, it was a series of small, steady moments that slowly built trust. They worked together often now, sometimes by plan and sometimes by chance. When work ended, they would sit under the open sky, sharing food and resting their tired bodies. The rancher's daughter was not used to talking much about herself. Most people either judged her or tried to change her. With the Apache girl, it felt different. There was no pressure to explain why she was the way she was. She could speak freely, knowing her words would not be twisted or laughed at. This made her feel lighter, as if a heavy weight had been slowly lifted from her chest. The Apache girl, in turn, felt safe around the rancher's daughter. She admired her honesty and her steady way of facing life. Many people saw only the rancher's daughter's size and strength, but the Apache girl noticed her kindness. She saw how gently she treated animals, how patiently she repaired broken things, and how carefully she listened when others spoke. These details mattered more than appearances. They began to help each other beyond shared work. When the Apache girl's family needed help moving supplies, the rancher's daughter came without being asked. When the rancher faced a difficult season, the Apache girl offered her time and support. Neither kept count of favors. Their bond was built on mutual respect, not debt. The town, however, noticed their growing closeness. At first, people paid little attention. Two women working together was not unusual. But as time went on, whispers began to follow them. Some were curious, others uneasy. The town liked things to stay familiar, and this quiet partnership did not fit into any category they understood. The rancher's daughter heard the whispers but tried not to let them settle in her mind. She had spent most of her life fighting judgment. Now, she wanted peace. Still, the voices sometimes returned at night, reminding her of how easily people could turn kind words into sharp ones. The Apache girl was also aware of the attention. She had learned from a young age that standing out invited judgment. Yet she had also learned the value of walking with pride. She did not change her behavior or hide her friendship. Instead, she stayed calm, letting actions speak louder than words. One evening, after a long day, they sat near the edge of the fields as the sun dipped below the horizon. The sky turned soft shades of orange and purple. For a while, they sat in silence, listening to the wind move through the grass. The rancher's daughter finally spoke, her voice low. "Do you ever get tired of people deciding who you should be?" she asked. The Apache girl nodded. "All the time," she replied. "But I learned that their ideas are smaller than the truth." These words stayed with the rancher's daughter. She had spent years trying to shrink herself to make others comfortable, even though her body could never truly fit their expectations. Hearing someone say that the truth was bigger than others, ideas felt powerful. As days turned into months, the friendship deepened into something neither had named before. It showed itself in the way they looked for each other in a crowd, or how they stood a little closer during conversations. There was comfort in shared silence and warmth in simple gestures. Still, they moved carefully, aware of the world around them. Marriage talk in the town grew louder. Families planned celebrations, and young women prepared for futures shaped by tradition. The rancher's daughter felt the pressure more strongly now. People began speaking directly to her, offering suggestions and advice she had not asked for. "You should soften yourself," one woman said kindly but firmly. "Men like gentle brides." Another suggested she hide her strength, as if it were something shameful. Each comment felt like a reminder that the town did not see her as she truly was. The Apache girl watched these moments closely. She saw the tension in the rancher's daughter's shoulders and the way her smile faded. One afternoon, after hearing yet another comment, the rancher's daughter finally let her frustration show. "I don't think I can be what they want," she said quietly. The Apache girl looked at her with steady eyes. "Maybe you're not meant to be," she replied. "Maybe you're meant to be yourself." These simple words carried deep meaning. They planted a seed of courage in the rancher's daughter's heart. For the first time, she began to imagine a life shaped by choice rather than expectation. Their bond soon faced its first real test. During a community gathering, someone made a loud remark about the rancher's daughter's size, followed by laughter. The room fell quiet for a moment, waiting to see how she would react. In the past, she would have stayed silent. This time, the Apache girl stepped forward. She did not raise her voice or argue. She simply stood beside the rancher's daughter, her presence firm and calm. The message was clear without words. The laughter faded, replaced by awkward silence. Later, alone together, the rancher's daughter felt overwhelmed. Gratitude and fear mixed inside her. She realized that standing with someone meant also standing against the crowd. "I don't want to cause trouble for you," she said. The Apache girl shook her head. "You didn't," she replied. "Truth only feels like trouble to those who fear it." From that day on, the rancher's daughter understood that connection brought responsibility. Choosing honesty meant facing consequences, but it also meant living fully. Their feelings grew stronger, though still unspoken. They shared dreams not of grand futures but of simple peace. A life built on work, respect, and understanding. A place where laughter did not come at the cost of dignity. The town continued to watch, unsure of what to make of them. Some people softened, noticing their kindness and strength. Others grew more distant, holding tightly to old beliefs. By the end of part 2, the rancher's daughter stood at a crossroads. She could continue trying to fit into a role that never suited her, or she could choose a path that felt true, even if it meant standing apart. With the Apache girl by her side, the fear of that choice felt less heavy. The bond between them was no longer just friendship. It had become a quiet promise of support, one strong enough to challenge years of judgment. And though the future remained uncertain, one thing was clear. The rancher's daughter was no longer alone, and she was beginning to believe that her strength was never something to hide. The change did not happen all at once. It arrived slowly, like a truth that could no longer be ignored. The rancher's daughter felt it in the way her heart grew restless whenever the town spoke about her future. She felt it in the quiet strength she found when the Apache girl stood beside her. The life others planned for her no longer felt possible, and pretending became heavier than standing alone. People in the town began speaking to her more openly now. They believed they were helping. Some offered advice, others warnings. A few tried to arrange meetings with men they thought would be suitable. Each time, the rancher's daughter listened politely, then returned to her work. Inside, her thoughts were changing. She no longer asked herself how to fit in. She began asking herself how to live honestly. One afternoon, her father called her to sit with him on the porch. He had heard the talk in town. He had seen the looks, felt the tension. He cared deeply for his daughter and wanted her to have peace, even if he did not fully understand her path. "They say you should start thinking about settling down," he said gently. She looked out over the land before answering. "I am thinking," she replied, "just not the way they expect." Her father studied her face. He saw the strength he had always known, but also a new calm. He nodded slowly. "I don't need to understand everything," he said. "I just want you to be sure." His words gave her courage. She realized that certainty did not come from approval, it came from truth. The Apache girl sensed the shift as well. She noticed how the rancher's daughter spoke with more confidence and stood taller, not in pride, but in honesty. They spent long evenings talking now, not just about work or weather, but about values and hopes. They spoke about respect, about choosing kindness even when it was difficult, about building a life rooted in dignity. Still, neither had spoken directly about the choice forming between them. Words felt powerful, and both understood that once spoken, they could not be taken back. The town already watched them closely. Naming their bond would invite more judgment, yet silence could not last forever. The moment came during a town gathering meant to celebrate the season's work. Music played softly, and people gathered in small groups. The rancher's daughter stood near the edge, as she often did. Someone nearby laughed and said loudly, she'd scare away any groom. The words were not new, but something inside her finally refused to bend. She felt the Apache girl's presence beside her, steady and calm. Without raising her voice, the rancher's daughter spoke. "I don't need a groom," she said clearly. "I need a life that fits me." The laughter stopped. Faces turned. Some looked shocked, others confused. The room felt still. She did not explain further. She did not apologize. She simply stood where she was, breathing steadily. Later that evening, away from the crowd, the weight of what she had done settled in. She knew the town would talk. She knew the words would spread. Fear tried to return, but it did not take hold. The Apache girl stood with her under the night sky. "You were brave," the Apache girl said. "I was honest," the rancher's daughter replied, for the first time. They walked in silence for a while. Then the rancher's daughter stopped and turned to her. Her voice was quiet but sure. "I choose you," she said. "Not to make a statement, not to challenge anyone. I choose you because this feels true." The Apache girl did not rush to speak. She took a breath, her eyes warm and steady. "I choose you too," she replied, "for the same reason." The choice did not bring immediate peace. By morning, the town was alive with whispers. Some people expressed concern, others opened judgment. A few tried to convince the rancher's daughter that she was making a mistake. They warned her of loneliness, of hardship, of being misunderstood. She listened without anger. She had spent years hearing worse. This time the words felt distant. She had made her choice with care, not defiance. That made all the difference. Life grew more complicated. Some doors closed. Invitations stopped coming. Certain neighbors avoided her gaze. The rancher's daughter felt the loss, but she did not regret her decision. Each challenge reminded her why honesty mattered. The Apache girl faced her own struggles. She had always carried her identity with pride, but now the weight of judgment increased. She met it with calm strength, refusing to let others define her. Together, they found comfort in routine and purpose. They worked, shared meals, and rested under open skies. Slowly, small changes appeared in the town. A few people began to greet them again. Some noticed that despite the whispers, the two women lived with kindness and responsibility. They helped when help was needed. They caused no harm. Their quiet dignity began to soften hardened views. One evening, the rancher's daughter returned to the porch where she had spoken with her father weeks before. He joined her, sitting quietly. "I hear the talk," he said. She nodded. "I know." He paused, then spoke carefully. "You seem steady." "I am," she replied. He placed a hand on hers. "Then that's what matters." By the end of part 3, the choice had been made and spoken aloud. It had cost comfort and familiarity, but it had given something far greater in return. The rancher's daughter no longer lived to meet expectations that denied her truth. She had chosen a life rooted in respect, courage, and connection. The road ahead was uncertain, but she walked it without fear. She was no longer trying to shrink herself for others. Standing beside the Apache girl, she had learned that choosing truth was not an act of rebellion. It was an act of self-respect. Life after the choice was quieter in some ways and heavier in others. The rancher's daughter woke each morning to the same land, the same animals, the same work, but the air around her felt different. It was as if the town had shifted slightly away from her. Some people no longer greeted her. Others spoke only when necessary. The silence carried meaning, but she refused to let it shape her spirit. She focused on what she could control. She worked the land with care, guided the animals gently, and repaired what was broken. Hard work had always grounded her, and now it became her anchor. When her hands were busy, her mind found peace. Each completed task reminded her that her worth did not depend on approval. The Apache girl stayed close, not out of fear but out of choice. They moved through their days with steady rhythm. Sometimes they worked together, sometimes apart, but they always returned to each other by evening. They shared simple meals and quiet conversations, often under the open sky. In those moments, the noise of the town faded, replaced by calm understanding. Still, challenges came. A local supplier who once offered fair trade suddenly raised prices without explanation. A community event they had always supported passed without invitation. These small acts carried clear messages. The rancher's daughter felt the sting, but she did not react with anger. She had learned that reacting would only give the judgment more power. One afternoon, a neighbor she had known since childhood approached her near the fence line. His tone was careful, his eyes unsure. "You've made things difficult," he said, not unkindly. "I've made things honest," she replied. He sighed and walked away. The exchange left her thoughtful but firm. She realized that many people confuse discomfort with harm. Her truth challenged their habits, not their safety. The Apache girl faced similar moments. Some people questioned her loyalty to tradition. Others assumed she had abandoned her values. She answered none of it with defense. Instead, she lived as she always had, with respect for her roots and pride in her identity. Her calm presence spoke louder than arguments ever could. Together, they learned the art of quiet resilience. They did not demand acceptance. They did not explain themselves repeatedly. They lived their lives with care and responsibility, trusting that time would reveal what words could not. There were moments of doubt. Late at night, when the wind moved through the fields and sleep came slowly, the rancher's daughter sometimes wondered if the cost was too high. She thought of the ease she had lost, the simple comfort of blending in. In those moments, the Apache girl's steady presence reminded her why she had chosen this path. "You don't have to be strong all the time," the Apache girl said once, sensing her thoughts. "I know," the rancher's daughter replied, "but I am strong because I choose to be." As seasons changed, the land demanded attention. A harsh stretch tested everyone's patience and resources. Fences broke, supplies ran low, and help was needed. Without hesitation, the rancher's daughter stepped forward. She organized repairs, shared what she could, and worked alongside anyone willing. The Apache girl joined her, offering knowledge passed down through generations. Together, they helped stabilize what could have easily fallen apart. People noticed. Gratitude began to replace distance in some hearts. Not everyone changed, but enough did to soften the edges of daily life. One evening, a woman who had once whispered harsh words approached them quietly. She thanked them for their help and spoke awkwardly of respect. It was not an apology, but it was a beginning. The rancher's daughter accepted it without comment. She had learned that change often arrived slowly, wrapped in uncertainty. Her father watched all of this with quiet pride. He saw how his daughter carried herself through difficulty without bitterness. One night, he spoke plainly. "You've built something solid," he said. "Not everyone can do that." She smiled, feeling seen in a way she had long desired. The Apache girl also found moments of affirmation. Elders in her community noticed her balance of tradition and independence. They saw that her choices had not weakened her values but strengthened them. This recognition gave her peace. By the end of this part of their journey, life had not become easy, but it had become real. The laughter that once hurt had lost its sharpness. Judgment still existed, but it no longer defined them. They had built a life rooted in work, respect, and quiet courage. They learned that standing together did not mean standing against the world. It meant standing firmly in their truth, allowing the world to adjust if it chose to. And whether it did or not, they knew they would endure. Part 4 ends with endurance, not triumph, with steady hearts rather than loud victories. The rancher's daughter had learned that strength was not proven by force, but by consistency. And with the Apache girl beside her, she understood that a shared life built on respect could outlast even the strongest judgment. Time moved forward, steady and patient, just like the land itself. The rancher's daughter no longer measured her days by what the town said or did not say. She measured them by the work completed, the calm in her chest, and the quiet joy she felt when she returned home each evening. Life had shaped her through effort and struggle, but now it also offered peace. The bond between her and the Apache girl had grown deep and natural. It was not loud or dramatic. It lived in small habits and shared understanding. They rose early, worked hard, and rested when the day allowed. They laughed quietly at simple things and shared silence without discomfort. Their connection felt strong because it was built on honesty, not performance. Over time, the town continued to change, slowly and unevenly. Some people still held tight to old beliefs. Others began to let go, not because they were told to, but because they witnessed something real. They saw two people living responsibly, helping when help was needed, and asking for nothing extra in return. The fear that once fueled judgment began to lose its power. A turning point came during a difficult season when the land faced unexpected challenges. Crops failed in places, and supplies ran low. The rancher's daughter and the Apache girl did not hesitate. They shared what they had, organized support, and worked alongside others without keeping score. Their actions reminded the town of something important. Character showed itself in effort, not opinion. One afternoon during this time, a group gathered near the ranch to discuss plans. The rancher's daughter spoke clearly and calmly, offering practical ideas. No one laughed. No one questioned her presence. People listened. Some even nodded in agreement. It was a quiet moment, but it carried deep meaning. Later, as they walked home, the Apache girl smiled gently. "They see you now," she said. The rancher's daughter shook her head. "They always could," she replied. "They just weren't ready." That night, under a wide sky filled with stars, the rancher's daughter thought about the words that once followed her everywhere. "Too big to be a bride." The phrase felt distant now, almost unreal. She understood that it had never been about her size. It had been about fear of difference, fear of strength that could not be controlled. She was no longer trying to prove anything. Her life spoke for itself. Her father grew older, slower in movement but steady in spirit. He often sat on the porch, watching the land and the two women working together. One evening he spoke softly. "You've built a good life," he said, "one that makes sense." She nodded, feeling a warmth she had once longed for. Approval no longer ruled her heart, but understanding still mattered. The Apache girl also found balance. She remained deeply connected to her roots while shaping her future with care. She taught traditions, shared stories, and lived her values openly. People who once misunderstood began to ask questions, not out of doubt but curiosity. She answered when she felt it mattered and stayed silent when it did not. Together, they created a home that reflected who they were. It was simple, strong, and welcoming. People who entered felt the calm immediately. There was no need for explanations. Respect lived in the walls and the routines. As years passed, younger girls in the town began to watch the rancher's daughter differently. They saw someone who did not shrink herself to fit expectations. They saw strength without harshness, confidence without cruelty. Quietly, the idea of what a bride could be began to change. One day, a young girl asked her, "Did it hurt when they laughed?" The rancher's daughter thought for a moment. "Yes," she answered honestly, "but it hurt more to pretend I was someone else." That truth carried more power than any lesson. The town never fully became perfect or free of judgment, but it grew. And growth, the rancher's daughter learned, did not require approval from everyone. It required courage from someone willing to stand still long enough for others to see clearly. The Apache girl remained by her side through it all. Not as a symbol, not as a statement, but as a partner. Their life was not defined by resistance, but by choice. Each day, they chose respect, effort, and truth. In the end, the laughter that once tried to define the rancher's daughter faded into memory. What remained was a story of a woman who refused to be reduced to someone else's idea. She was never too big to be a bride. She was simply too real for a world that had not yet learned how wide love could be. Their story did not end with applause or grand celebration. It ended with steady mornings, honest work, and peaceful evenings. And that was enough.